Russia cannot win on the battlefield. Uh, it has been pushed back in the east of Ukraine. It's been pushed back in the south of Ukraine. Ukraine is on the verge not only of reclaiming all the territory that Russia has seized this year, but putting pressure on territory that Russia has occupied since 2014.
Now, winter might be on the way for us, but Ukraine, certainly over there, temperatures are dropping and it's setting in as the war with Russia shows little sign of any let up. There was a UN Security Council meeting held last night by video link. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of crimes against humanity after a series of fresh missile attacks caused widespread blackouts across Ukraine. He called it a Russian formula of terror, forcing millions of people to stay without heating and without water in sub-zero temperatures.
We cannot be hostage to one international terrorist. Russia is doing everything to make an energy generator a more powerful tool than the UN Charter. But we can bring the real sense back to all the things. And first of all, the UN Charter. We need your decisions.
That was a translation, obviously, of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky speaking at the UN Security Council meeting that was held late last night. Well, nuclear power plants also went offline. The Zaporizhzhia plant, which is Europe's largest, was once again forced to rely on diesel generators to keep its cooling systems safe. Now, neighbouring Moldova also experienced massive blackouts yesterday, but it wasn't directly hit. Let's catch up with Scott Lucas. He is Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute, the University College Dublin. Good morning, Scott.
Morning, Anna.
So, Scott, blackouts in Ukraine and also Moldova. What's the Russian president's plan here?
To avoid defeat. I mean, let's put it like it is. Russia cannot win on the battlefield. It has been pushed back in the east of Ukraine. It's been pushed back in the south of Ukraine. Ukraine is on the verge not only of reclaiming all the territory that Russia has seized this year, but putting pressure on territory that Russia has occupied since 2014. So how do you avoid that when Vladimir Putin wanted to make this his legacy, to conquer Ukraine and make it part of greater Russia? Well, you do two things. With Ukraine itself is you try to knock out its energy infrastructure. You launch wave after wave of missiles, rockets, Iranian-made attack drones to try to take out the nuclear plants, to try to take out the electrical grid. And we saw just the latest of that yesterday with 70 missiles and 5 drones being launched. And then the second part of this is against us. It is the threat to cut off energy or to restrict it across Europe and in the UK, hoping that that breaks international support for the Ukrainian resistance. Do I think it will succeed? No, I don't think it will succeed against the Ukrainians, who, without heat, without water in many cases, will still resist. And I don't think it's going to succeed in breaking international support. In fact, the opposite happened yesterday. Just hours before the latest attacks, the European Parliament labeled Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. That's an unprecedented designation, and I expect a number of European states to follow with that label.
It's interesting, Scott, because, I mean, we've talked a lot this morning about how, here in the UK, ministers are planning a £25 million public information campaign encouraging people to reduce their energy bills. Yet we've heard other campaigns are taking place in other countries around Europe. But Putin is directly targeting in Ukraine, it would seem at the moment, the country's energy infrastructure. There is no let-up, is there?
Well, it is still going to be tough times with the onset of winter in Ukraine, and winters can get harsh there. But I would watch for this, Anna, and that is Russia has used up a lot of its missiles. It is now relying on Iran for drones. So the wave just before yesterday, Russia launched 100 missiles, its largest of the invasion so far. 85 of them were shot down, 15 got through. Yesterday, it was 70 missiles, so it was a reduction. 51 of them were shot down. Russia's missile stocks may be to the point where it cannot even carry out these strikes again and again and again on such a scale? And if that's the case, where does Moscow go next?
Mm. I'm looking at some images out of the Ukrainian capital Kyiv in complete darkness last night after those Russian missile attacks. And, some of the buildings in the capital are multi-story buildings. And we've heard also that there is a lack of water supply. When you take out those key infrastructures, though, we've talked a lot about morale in the war in Ukraine, but it's also denting that as well. So what do you expect we will hear from the Ukrainian president as he continues to appeal to other nations for help?
Well, we heard it yesterday already from
Mm.
Vladimir Zelensky, because the day had started with the Russian attack on a maternity hospital, killing a newborn baby. Then, after the waves of assaults later in the day, Zelensky linked the developments by saying, today, Europe designated Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. And then Vladimir Putin upheld that designation.
Oh,
But
I
let me
think
make a slight correction to you.
go on. Sorry, we lost your line there. Go on, Scott.
Yeah, but let me make a slight correction here, Anna, and that
Mm.
is it's not denting the morale of Ukrainians.
Mm.
It is killing Ukrainians. We had another 7 that were killed in and near the capital Kyiv yesterday. It injured 36 in the region. They gather in their underground shelters. They gather at hotspots where they can get generation of electricity, where they can charge their phones, where they can get something hot to drink. And after 9 months, they still stand. So the question is, will we stand behind them? Because I think you have a desperate man, one desperate man in Moscow, and he's facing a nation that will not give in to his desperation.
Always good to get your thoughts on the situation and the war in Ukraine. That is Scott Lucas. Thank you very much for joining us. He is Professor of International Politics at the Clinton Institute at the University College Dublin.